That's Enough Out of You podcast is sponsored by Todd John's Law. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people, whether it's the result of an auto accident caused by the carelessness of another driver or being charged with a crime. Dealing with the aftermath of a personal injury accident or being involved with the criminal justice system can be extremely difficult. That's why, whatever you're facing, you should never go it alone. You need an experienced attorney who will stand by you every step of the way. Todd is experienced, licensed, trusted, respected, and guaranteed. No one will work harder or more diligently on your behalf, and he will personally handle your case from beginning to end. Located on Drinker Street in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, Todd has been representing the legal rights of Scranton and Wilkes-Barre personal injury victims and those accused of a crime for over 20 years. At Todd John's Law, the utmost priority is ensuring that your rights are always protected and that your case is resolved as quickly and fairly as possible so that you can move on with your life. Call Todd John's Law at 570-876-6903. With Todd John's Law, you will receive equal justice under the law. All right, welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, your main host, Bill Rader. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on today, bud?
Billy raves. He loves throwing out that main host thing.
I am the main host.
How you doing, buddy?
You're the. I guess you could be like the other main host.
Nah, we're fine with the way we are, buddy.
All right.
It's fine.
All right. Sounds good to me. So, yeah, everything's going good. We got the holidays coming up. I think we're gonna be in for some busy days ahead. But that's just how it is during the holidays. You think you're gonna have a nice relaxing time, and then
Never, Billy, never.
Oh, before you know it, you're pulling your hair out, trying to get everything, ready for Christmas, and then it's over, and then you're back to work, and it's like, all right, when do I get to relax? But anyway, we got a great guest today, our friend of the podcast, and coming back for more fun with us, and that's Don McGovern. Don, how you doing,
Don?
Doing great. Thanks once again for having me back. I always enjoy coming on. It's always fun.
Always fun, buddy. Always fun. So today we're going to talk about another, disinformation jackal that's out there, and that's the Mike Rothmiller book, Bombshell, The Night Bobby Kennedy Killed Marilyn Monroe. Now, Don, Rothmiller gave a lot of information, but Douglas Thompson wrote this, correct?
Correct. It was, Rothmiller provided all of the story and all of the information that he had. And then somebody else did some other quote unquote investigations into Marilyn's life. And I think it was Douglas Thompson, and he wrote the book. Right.
Okay. Now, you point out, Don, that it's interesting that he used the word killed instead of murdered.
Yeah, I just found that I suppose killed, murdered, they're kind of like sort of synonyms, but, in the book, they make it clear that it's murder. He murdered Marilyn. And I don't really know where else this industry, this Robert Kennedy killed, murdered Marilyn Monroe industry can go. I mean, this reaches the mountaintop as far as I'm concerned. I mean, where else can they go with this?
I don't know, but as long as they're making money, they're going to continue to lie.
Yeah, but it's one thing to say Robert Kennedy was peripherally involved in Marilyn's death, or he aided in a cover-up or whatever. But to actually say he stood in Marilyn's kitchen and created a Mickey Finn, for lack of a better word, that was poison, which he ordered her to drink, which she did, which almost immediately killed her. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and to provide no evidence to back that up.
He provides no evidence whatsoever.
It's unbelievable.
He has a tale that he encountered Peter Lawford, who has been dead for many, many years now, in the Playboy Mansion in the spring of 1982, and coerced or convinced Lawford to meet him in a city park in Los Angeles and held an interview with him, and that's when Lawford told that he was there the night Bobby Kennedy poisoned Marilyn and murdered her.
And
But
he came out with this information only after Lawford was dead, right?
Well, Lawford died on Christmas Eve of 1984. I mean, he died 2 years after Rothmiller allegedly interviewed him in the park in 1982. And from everything I've read about Peter Lawford, by 1982, he was already extremely ill, suffering from years of alcoholism and drug abuse. And, excuse me, I'm not going to say that Rothmiller could not have interviewed Lawford in 1982, but I don't have a whole lot of reason to believe it, right?
Sure.
He offers no evidence, and there's no way to corroborate anything that he says, because everybody that's been involved or everybody that Rothmiller uses as a source are dead.
And that's pretty much the tactic that Heyman used.
Pretty much. That's exactly right.
You know, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you make up these interviews with people that you know they're dead. There's no way to ask them about it, and you can just basically say whatever you want, and that's what these jackals are doing.
Well, let me talk a minute about David Hyman. Okay.
Yeah.
In my book or on my website, I have a lengthy section dedicated to him and his rather dishonest practices when he was writing these quote-unquote biographies, okay? And one of his favorite sources pertaining to Marilyn, her life, her loves, what she did, what she didn't do, was Peter Lawford. How convenient that Lawford died 5 years before he published his first Kennedy book, which was a woman named Jackie.
Unbelievable.
Where a good portion of what appears in Bombshell appeared first in that book.
Wow.
Although certain portions of it also appeared in the 1985 version of what's his name? I'm drawing a blank. The Summers book.
Summers.
Goddess, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of what is in the Hyman book and a lot of what is in Bombshell also appeared in a certain form in Goddess, but most of it came from Hyman. Now, Hyman claimed that everything he put in that book he got from an interview with Peter Lawford. And he claimed that he had recorded the interview. Do you know Donna Morell?
I know the name, Don. I'm familiar with the name, and I've seen emails that you sent.
Well, Donna is just a great researcher, and she probably knows more about David Hyman's dishonest practices than anybody else on the planet. She spent a couple of weeks at the university he attended, which has all of his papers, all of his archive, okay? Stony Brook is where his archive is housed.
Okay.
And she tried to find this interview, this taped interview that Hyman allegedly had with Lawford. She even corresponded with Hyman about this. And she tells me in emails that Hyman was always very nervous when she would question him about this interview, okay?
Of course.
She sent me 6 pages of handwritten notes that Hyman had written that is supposed to be this interview.
Okay.
6 handwritten pages is all it was. And this when I looked at this, I could not believe it. It's basically Hyman scribbling things out that apparently he wanted people to believe this was an interview, and there are phrases and words that have been crossed through and other phrases and words written above and below, and I kept asking myself, well, which words did Lawford actually speak? It's just the most preposterous thing I've ever seen. And that is basically what Hyman did. He invented all of this dialogue and all of this testimony from Peter Lawford, and none of it can be taken at face value. None of it.
But Don, the danger to that is when, people in the mainstream, when they quote, from these interviews and stuff that never existed. I mean, then it's like it carries some weight because people think that, maybe they actually interviewed the person and said this stuff.
Right.
So when you get this out in the air like this, I mean, it's awful, it's disgusting, and it's really dangerous. And what an awful practice that this guy was doing.
Well, he was just basically a liar. I mean, what else can you say?
And they can't say
anything.
Of course,
he's dead now, but even his girlfriend admitted that he was just not a trustworthy person.
Wow.
He made a lot of money. His books always sold.
Sure.
A lot.
Sure.
He wrote A Woman Named Jackie, a quote-unquote biography about RFK. He wrote, Bobby and Jacqueline had an affair. Bobby and Jackie, a love story. Then he wrote his final book was about Marilyn and Joe DiMaggio, and that was published posthumously. And there is nothing in that can be believed. Nothing in it. It's in fact, an article was written by David C. Johnston that appeared in Newsweek about all of Hyman's terrible practices and how many lies he told about virtually everybody he wrote about. And it's pathetic. He claimed, for example, that Marilyn actually called Jackie Kennedy at the White House and talked to Jackie about her affair with John.
Oh my God.
And Jacqueline told Marilyn, this is from Hyman now. Jacqueline, this allegedly came from Peter Lawford, that Jacqueline told Marilyn that she would leave and she could move in and become the first lady. I mean, it's...
Oh my God. My God.
And I read an article about this one time, and I wrote a rather terse and pointed comment about that this was nothing but a lie, it was nothing but made up. And I was jumped on by people with both feet. Oh, no, Marilyn actually called Jacqueline Kennedy and spoke to her about this. And it's just, to believe that Marilyn Monroe would have done that shows that those people don't know anything about Marilyn Monroe.
Exactly.
She would never have done such a thing. But that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of Hyman. He is equally as bad as Robert Schweitzer and our good friend Frank Capel, and even I'm going to say that probably the guy who wrote the book with factoids, Norman Mailer.
Right.
I don't think Mailer's quite as bad as Hyman or Schweitzer, but he's pretty bad because he finally admitted that he made a lot of that book up as well.
Unbelievable. Well, Don, let's get into Rothmiller and let's get into this book Bombshell. So, basically Rothmiller was he was a detective at the Organized Crime Intelligence Division at LAPD, which I know, police intelligence units work pretty closely with the CIA. So, disinformation and stuff is easily spread. But it was what, 1972. He joins the LAPD at 21 years old.
That's correct.
And then he, according, to promotions in his book, he's drawn on, secret police files, and of course the Marilyn Monroe diary that we know, that was all made up. And then, he also said, never before published firsthand testimony, this is just ridiculous. But let's get into the book a little bit, Don, and let's start. We know the thing that RFK, we talked when we had you on a couple of times about the Gilroy, California. We know that that's where RFK was. There's no doubt about that. But according to Rothmiller here, he claims that Peter Lawford met RFK at the LA airport on August 4th at noon, correct?
At noon, and they drove to, Lawford's house, and
in Santa
they
Monica,
telephoned to Marilyn, and then they went to Marilyn's house, and they pulled into her entrance court there on where she lived at 2 p.m. That's right.
And now, we don't have any record of these calls, right? Even though Fred Otash supposedly was taping the phones, right?
Well, everybody was taping Marilyn, even Marilyn.
But there's no record of this call.
No, there's nothing to support that Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn actually spoke on the telephone on August the 4th. And certainly there's so much evidence against Bobby Kennedy being in Los Angeles. There's no question in my mind that he was not. He was in Gilroy, California.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt about it. So then the book claims that he drove to Brentwood, right? To Marilyn's hacienda, and that's around 2 in the afternoon.
Well, he says exactly 2.
Okay.
They drove into her entrance court there, her parking court at 2 p.m. Yes.
And at this point, Marilyn is so upset with RFK, but yet she has time to set this huge buffet up for him.
Right. But what happens when she's there is the interesting part.
Okay, go ahead.
Apparently this visit turns into a invective-laced argument where Marilyn is really upset. She gets even more upset. And according to Rothmiller and Thompson, she grabs a kitchen knife. I guess they're in the kitchen. And she goes after Bobby Kennedy. She's going to stab him. But Peter Lawford and Bobby wrestle her to the ground and disarm her. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That came directly from Hyman's, a woman named Jackie.
Unbelievable.
Okay? Now, Hyman repeats that attack in his book about Robert Kennedy. He doesn't mention it in the book about when he's writing about Bobby and Jacqueline have a love affair. But when we get to the Joe and Marilyn book, Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love, Hyman changes the knife. Are you ready?
Yeah.
To a glass of bubbly.
Jeepers.
Marilyn throws a glass of champagne in Bobby Kennedy's face. And I wonder now why, or how in the hell did that get changed? What prompted Hyman to make that change? So I went to his source notes, and the source note for that change was that Peter Lawford changed his story. Okay? Now,
yeah.
Peter Lawford had been dead for almost 30 years. So when did Peter Lawford change his story?
Oh my God. Yeah. Unbelievable.
And they actually repeated that in this book. And this is the truth to them. This is exactly what happened. Yeah, but what I want to know is where are Eunice Murray
Yeah.
and Pat Newcomb.
Because they were
They
at the
don't
house
mention them.
and they're not, yeah.
They don't mention them.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they don't mention. Do you really think that Pat Newcomb would have stood by while Marilyn attacked Bobby Kennedy with a knife and
No.
Peter Loft and Robert Kennedy had wrestled her to the ground and disarmed? It's amazing what these people will write.
It really is. And Don, we talked about this, there's evidence, that RFK, that can't be really disputed, that he was at the Bates resident in Gilroy, California. I mean,
well, there are 10 pictures, as we've talked about before, that were taken that day. 9 of them were taken that day. Actually, one was taken on early in the morning of the 5th when they got back from church. But Susan Bernard discovered a letter in 2004-5, that John Bates Sr. had written her father, Bruno, in 1986. And that letter has an explanation of each photograph, what's going on, what time of day it was. In the morning, they went for a horseback ride to Mount Madonna. According to John Bates Sr., that took most of the morning. So they consumed most of the morning on horses riding. When they got back, they had a barbecue, swam, and then they had a barbecue, swam some more, and then they played a touch football game, and they had to hike almost a mile uphill to get to a portion of the ranch that was flat enough for a football game. There are pictures of all of this transpiring during the day. Then after the football game, they came back home, swam a little bit more, and then the kids went up and get dressed for dinner. But the senior Bates said when all the kids came down, Bobby threw them all in a swimming pool. Okay? So the kids had to go back up, dry off, change clothes, and get ready for dinner. After they fed the kids, they sat down the adults sat down for dinner at approximately 8:15, and they didn't get through eating till about 10:30. So Bobby was there the whole day. This was all confirmed by John Bates Sr., his wife Nancy, his son John Bates Jr., and Roland Snyder, who was the foreman of the ranch. So how could Bobby have been in California, Southern California, at 2 p.m., and then again at night, when basically by the time the episode of the poisoning happens, according to these two writers, that Bobby's in bed, asleep, really.
And Don, just to tell, to let our listeners know, from Gilroy, California to Marilyn's place, you're talking over 300 miles.
Well, 310 miles, you're right, as the crow flies.
So Bobby Kennedy's in bed at 10:30, and Marilyn is what at midnight? Really, she's in a coma, right?
Well, I firmly believe that Marilyn is probably dead by midnight. She's in a coma before that.
Okay.
Now, there's testimony that of the men who handled her, who picked her corpse up in the morning of the 5th, and other people. She was taken to a mortuary first before she was taken downtown for autopsy. And those people testified and have said many times when they talk to these writers that they believe Marilyn died sometime around 9 or 10 o'clock p.m.
Right.
So at midnight, I believe Marilyn was either gone or she was certainly in a coma by then, yeah.
So we know how Mark Shaw dealt with the Bates problem. He just transformed Bates into Frank Regano and made him a whole different person and tried to discredit him. How does Rothmiller and Thompson handle the Bates problem?
They don't mention them.
That's a good way. Yeah, just ignore
They
it.
just ignore it. I think there is a sentence in the book that the attorney general and his wife visited some friends that weekend. That's all they say about it. They don't.
Wow.
They don't even. To them, the Bates people or the visit to the Bates Ranch doesn't even exist. Yeah.
That's just so disgusting. It really is. Like it's really just awful, awful, awful journalism, if you want to call it that, or investigation. I don't even know what you want to call it. It's just.
Well, Donald Spoto interviewed all of them. Interviewed Senior Bates, interviewed Nancy, interviewed the son, and I contacted the son via email, and he interviewed Roland Snyder, and they all said basically the same thing. Bobby Kennedy never left the ranch. And I saw an interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Megyn Kelly had a long interview with him, and she brought up the Marilyn Monroe thing.
Right.
And he basically said they were in Northern California, and his father was with them all day.
Unbelievable.
But she didn't want to believe it either.
And that's the problem, Don. I mean, this has been going on for so long that people have accept this as fact. That's the problem.
Yeah, people just want to believe that Marilyn and John Kennedy had a long affair, which there's just no evidence to support that. And they want to believe that Marilyn and Bobby Kennedy had an affair, and there's no evidence at all to support that. And they both denied it. Okay, they both denied it. And they want to believe that Marilyn was murdered because they don't want to believe that she would have killed herself. And I don't understand why they can't accept that, because she attempted suicide 4 times before she succeeded.
In JFK, this whole time is in Massachusetts, right?
Yes, JFK is in. I think he's in Hyannisport. Yeah.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, but they're communicating, right? According to this book, RFK and JFK are communicating the whole time. Bobby's in Marilyn's house, slapping her around, getting attacked with a knife. They're communicating back and forth, and then eventually Bobby Kennedy disappears and goes into the kitchen and gets a glass of water and puts a saxitoxin in it, which is one of the most deadly poisons there is, by the way. It causes paralytic shellfish poisoning. Based on what I've read, the symptoms of that poisoning are onset almost immediately, and they kill you almost immediately. And 0.3 of a milligram, which is about like a poppy seed,
right,
can kill a human being. Yeah.
And they're saying this is shortly after 2 p.m. and yet she doesn't die till between 9 p.m. and midnight.
No. This is the midnight.
It's the midnight. Okay.
It's the nighttime encounter.
Okay.
During the 2 p.m. encounter, it's just the big fight.
Okay, that's right. All right. It's hard to keep all these lies straight, Don.
Yeah, well, you can't really. You can't.
I mean, it's just. So I already know the answer to this, but what does Rothmiller offer for evidence that RFK and JFK were communicating with each other?
None.
Of course.
In fact, I have a section in the book, in my article that I wrote, not my book, an article I wrote about this book called Extraordinary Evidence. And Carl Sagan once said that, to prove extraordinary claims, you have to be able to give extraordinary evidence. But as I point out in this section, they offer no evidence. The only evidence they can offer really is testimony from Fred Otash, which is, he's probably one of the most dishonest, dishonorable, terrible human beings that ever existed. And they want me to believe Fred Otash who says, yeah, Bobby Kennedy was in Los Angeles that day. They want me to believe him. They want you to believe Otash, as opposed to people at the Bates Ranch who were impeccable people.
Right. Exactly.
And there are people out there who believe Otash over the Bateses.
That's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's really disgusting. But let's move on down to the Marilyn's diary. So, we know from Marilyn's journals, what Marilyn's writing actually was like. And you want to talk about a little bit how Marilyn Monroe is presented in this book, because according to what people say from the diaries, she sounds like, a fourth grade education level.
Well, there are many people that have, I shouldn't say many, several people who have written about this diary and offered quotes from it. Okay, Bob Slatcher did, Ted Jordan did, the fellow that worked for the Lionel Grandison Sr. did, and Rothmiller is the most recent one. Okay, they all offer quotations, and all of them are different. But Rothmiller reduces her to kind of like a prepubescent, she just doesn't sound very intelligent. He turns her into almost an idiot. Okay.
Right.
Marilyn was not a good speller. If you look at her journals, and you can in that book Fragments that was published in 2010, she could not spell. None of her entries were ever dated. Okay.
Right.
And they appear all over the pages. She wrote in a very disjointed manner, and she often used arrows to lead from one thought to another where they were connected.
Right.
And none of that is ever mentioned in any of these quote unquote diaries that these people have read.
Of course.
None of that's ever mentioned. In all of those journals, she mentions John Kennedy or the Kennedys one time, and that she admired them because they represented the youth of America and sort of like the hope of America.
Right.
But she never mentions the mob. She never mentions anything like that. She never talks about Nikita Khrushchev. She never talks about Castro. She never talks about Johnny Rosselli or Sam Giancana or all that stuff that's supposed to have been in there. Does not appear in any of her journals. Let's see. According to Rothmiller, Marilyn wrote, Bobby called. He wants to see me. I think I made his back feel better, JFK's back. Yeah. John and I made love in the pool. Nikita is a horrible man and must be stopped. I'm scared there will be a war. John told me about Castro and he must be stopped. Bobby and I made love at Peter's. He wants to see me again. This is our secret. Frank invited me to the lodge, meaning Cal Neva. He said it will be fun. He said never to mention Sam Giancana.
Right.
Obviously, at the lounge. He's mafia.
Yeah.
Bobby is gentle. He listens to me. He's nicer than John.
Oh, my God.
It's ridiculous.
Pathetic. It's pathetic. And don't they mention something about, she said that JFK wanted to send more troops into Vietnam?
Yeah, John is sending more men to Vietnam. The communists must be stopped. It will be a long war.
And we had Jim Diogenio on talking about this at length about how JFK was pulling out the advisors. There was no combat troops there when JFK was president, and he was pulling out the advisors.
I listened to that episode. That's why I find all of this so humorous, and I know you do too. But
it's pathetic, humorous, but it's funny, but it's pathetic. It's just it's they're trying to discredit JFK and RFK, but they're making Marilyn Monroe sound like an idiot, when in fact, like her journals though, she was pretty intelligent in her writing. At least, I mean,
she was she was an intelligent person, period. I mean, you don't start your own production company and accomplish the things that she did.
Absolutely.
And become as big as she became if you don't have some brains.
Absolutely.
Idiots don't do that. But Mukadeen said, this is a good one. This is what he said she wrote. This is for all the people who ever called me a dumb blonde. I may be insecure, but not stupid. I only want to twinkle.
Oh boy. It's really sad that these people do this kind of stuff. And of course, we talked about this before, Don. This diary, that has all this information and nobody's ever seen it, or nobody's ever actually came out with it, and we never seen it. It's just that these people claim that they've seen it, but they offer no evidence of it.
Well, there are 3 pages that Rothmiller of handwritten transcriptions from what he said he read that appear in the book. And it's pretty preposterous, really. That's all. That's the only evidence he says he has. But we have to believe that he saw this diary and actually read this diary when nobody has ever seen it. In fact, I think I pointed this out once before, Marilyn denied that she kept the diary.
Right.
She was asked by an interviewer, do you keep a diary? She says, here's what she said, well, not exactly a diary. Sometimes when things used to happen, I used to write it down, but then I used to tear it up. And obviously that has been ignored because what Marilyn says and what Marilyn felt, and actually the real person never enters into any of these books. These are all fabricated. The person, the woman in this book is all fabricated. They fabricated her just like Norman Mailer fabricated his Marilyn.
Right.
Like David Hyman fabricated his Marilyn.
Right.
And when you read as many books as I have about her, and you follow all along all of this testimony and all the contradictions, it becomes apparent that they don't really care about Marilyn Monroe. They only care about their silly agenda of harming the memory and the legacy of Bobby Kennedy and John Kennedy and Marilyn. And I just really can't understand it. It's beyond understanding for me,
Same here. Well, Don, does Rothmiller does he offer any evidence that he why he actually just took notes from his diary, how he came about it, and why he doesn't have it to present? Does he offer any story on that, like how that came about?
No, he does
Unbelievable.
not.
Unbelievable.
And also, he said he listened to a bunch of tapes, these secret tapes.
Oh.
But there are no transcriptions of those tapes.
And
but he said he read transcriptions of the tapes that were included in these secret files. But he was never alone when he read the transcription, so he couldn't take notes.
Oh.
Now, let me ask you a question. If you never listened to the tapes, how could you possibly know that the transcriptions you read were real?
Yeah.
You couldn't.
You can't. No.
So basically, he says, you just have to take my word for this.
Okay.
Because I'm an honest guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But he didn't tell any of this. He didn't tell any of this to anybody. He mentioned a few things here and there over the years, okay?
Right.
None of this was ever told for almost, how long? From the 70s. He claims he knew Marilyn was murdered in the 70s. So it's, been 50 years?
Yeah. Wow.
So none of this ever came out for 50 years.
Unbelievable.
But I'm supposed to him now.
Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a section in this book where, and I asked the question, how do we know that Michael Rothmiller wasn't as bad as all of the other OCID detectives, who apparently were pretty bad?
Right. They were part of this gangster squad, right? Which who's worse? The cops or the gangsters? Because
who's worse, the gangsters or the cops? That's exactly right.
I mean, my
I asked
God,
the question, how did Michael Rothmiller feel about that? How did he feel about that behavior? What did he do while he worked there?
Right.
And they finally they admit in a kind of in passing sort of that Rothmiller was involved in some of the shenanigans that went on.
Wow.
That since he worked there, he was involved in it. But I'm supposed to just overlook that.
Right. Well, he also says, in the book, he claims that Frank Capel's, anti-communist behavior doesn't hamper his word, which is unbelievable because, obviously Capel's on an agenda for Hoover and the FBI.
Well, it just taints it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Capel's poison politics should be overlooked. Yeah, because he agrees with me. Right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And what about Sergeant Clemens?
Well, apparently Clemens and Rothmiller worked together, according to Rothmiller. Clemens died in 1996, I believe, 1998. Right. So none of what Rothmiller says about Clemens can be corroborated either.
Of course.
Because Clemens is dead. But the testimony that Rothmiller apparently got from Clemens is pretty remarkable because he claims that he did a lot that he never claimed in the past. I never heard any of this until I read this book about what Clemens said he did. Clemens said he actually wrote reports, told Rothmiller he actually wrote reports about that day. But according to Robert Schleitzer, who also knew Clemens and interviewed Clemens, that he didn't write any reports because he was only on site for about 15 or 20 minutes, which is borne out by the police reports, by the way.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But also Rothmiller claims, and I've heard about this before. It came via Robert Schleitzer again, that there is a big deposition. There was a big deposition in these secret files where Bobby Kennedy confessed to a Captain Edward Davis about his relationship with Marilyn and about that he had seen Marilyn and was involved in Marilyn. But once again, this deposition has never been seen.
Unbelievable.
But here's a couple of questions. Had charges been filed against Bobby Kennedy that would require a deposition?
No.
No.
This unbelievable.
And why would Bobby Kennedy murder Marilyn Monroe and then turn right around? Murder Marilyn Monroe to silence her.
Right.
And prevent her from going public about their affair, and then turn right around and tell the cops that he had an affair with her.
Oh my God. It's common.
And not only that, why would the cops want a deposition since according to Rothmiller, the cops were protecting Bobby?
Yeah. Yeah.
If it makes any sense.
Contradictions
it's nonsensical. It's nonsensical.
It's really pathetic. It really is.
Yeah. And once again, this big deposition, of course, it originated in the fertile mind of Robert Schleitzer, and it's just repeated now in 2023 or 2021 when this book was published.
And of course, these secret files, Don, nobody's ever seen these, or we don't have them physically to look through.
We don't have them physically. We don't have any of the tapes. Once again, there is no extraordinary evidence of any of this extraordinary claims. None.
And Don, we talked about this before. Just think if people had these secret files, or they had these tapes, or they had Marilyn Monroe's diary that had all this information about Castro and the mafia, and I mean, imagine what that's worth.
That'd be worth millions.
Nobody presents it.
According to what I've read, Milos Fariglio offered $15,000 reward if anybody had the diary.
Right.
Nobody ever came forward with the diary wanting the money. Another fella named Doug Wheeler, as I've read, offered six figures for the diary. I've read accounts for many dollars have been offered for this diary. And nobody has ever come forward with it. You know, Ted Jordan claimed he had it. And then he finally came clean and said the diary never existed. And that's probably the only true thing Ted Jordan ever said about Marilyn in her life. That diary never existed.
And see, Don, the problem I have is that this stuff makes it out into the mainstream and makes it into the public. And the thing is, if I'm a journalist, if I'm an investigator, and somebody comes to me with this claim that they've seen this diary, I mean, my first question is, where is it physically now? I want to see it. And how did you get your hands on it? How did you see it? And why don't you physically have it now? That would be the question that an honest, respectable journalist would ask, instead of just reporting this nonsense and basing it on somebody's word that they've seen it. Well, where is it?
Right, exactly. Where the hell is it?
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Where's this deposition? This big deposition that Bobby Kennedy, like I point out in my article, that would be downright dim-witted for Bobby Kennedy to do that. And I don't think Bobby Kennedy was dim-witted.
No, not at all. He was very intelligent man.
Yeah, I don't think he would murder Marilyn and then turn right around and admit it to a relationship with her.
No.
I just don't think Bobby Kennedy would murder anybody.
He wouldn't. And this stuff is just a bunch of hearsay. It's a bunch of garbage that, just gets out there, and irresponsible journalism allows this to happen. And it's really no questions asked. No.
I was reading articles the other day about this book that we're talking about here, and it's amazing what these journalists say about it. They present this stuff in a very thumbnail way, in a very vague way, and they present it as if this is the truth. Bobby Kennedy poisoned Marilyn Monroe.
Unbelievable. And of course, the autopsy doesn't show that, but let's ignore that. Let's ignore it.
Well, isn't it convenient, don't you think, that the poison that they claim Bobby Kennedy got from the CIA, that it couldn't be detected in 1962? I mean, isn't that convenient?
It is convenient. I just find it funny that now the CIA is helping the Kennedys. First, the mob was helping the Kennedys. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like all their enemies are helping them. It's unbelievable. It's just let's talk about the claim in the book about Peter Lawford. After witnessing the RFK allegedly murdering Marilyn, he gets stopped and pulled over by the LAPD for speeding. Let's talk about that.
Well, evidently, this has been written about by many people. Okay, this is not new to this book. But Lynn Franklin, a Beverly Hills police officer, and a highly decorated police officer, in fact, the first Beverly Hills undercover cop was Lynn Franklin, and he wrote 3 books. And Marilyn Monroe, and this traffic stop appears in one of them. He claimed that at 12:10 a.m. on the 5th, he pulled over Peter Lawford, driving his Lincoln Continental on Robertson Boulevard, going east. He was driving 70 miles an hour. The posted speed limit on Robertson Boulevard, even now, is 35. It was 35 in 62. And I've watched videos of Robertson Boulevard that are now available on the internet. And it is a extremely busy, crowded street. And from what I've read, it was extremely busy and crowded in 1962.
Right.
But Peter Lawford was driving his white Lincoln Continental, according to some books. In some books, it's black. In fact, in this book, it's black.
The details
70 miles an
matter,
hour. 70 miles an hour down this road with his headlights off. Okay? Now, I've watched videos of the traffic on Robertson Boulevard, and there is a traffic signal about every 2 blocks. I'm not going to say it was like that in 62, but there's no way there's no way Lawford was driving 70 miles an hour with his lights off on that road in 1962. But that's part of this book.
Well, why not bring attention to yourself down after you commit a murder? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Why not kill the world's most famous woman and then drive 70 miles an hour down the road with your headlights off?
So let me ask you this.
There's no report of this traffic
That's what I was going to
stop.
ask you. Where's the police report?
There isn't one. In fact, Bobby Kennedy was driving in a car, not only with a very drunk Lawford, by the way. Ralph Greenson was in the car with him.
Oh.
According to Lynn Franklin.
Wow.
But they don't explain in this book how Ralph Greenson gets in the car, because Ralph Greenson is not there when Bobby murders Marilyn.
Oh, okay.
But they have to pick him up. And there's a comment that some detectives later told Rothmiller they believe that when I'm sorry, when Lawford and Bobby Kennedy left Marilyn's dead body, they went and picked up Ralph Greenson. Oh my God!
And of course, there's a claim that Greenson has the tapes of Marilyn Monroe, right?
Well, those tapes were actually made by. Once again, those tapes never existed, but John Miner claimed that Greenson played some tapes for him of Marilyn doing sort of like a stream of consciousness soliloquy on these tapes. It's all bogus, John. It's all bogus. I have a section in my book on this guy. But that traffic stop, actually, if you follow along in this book, that traffic stop at 12:10 a.m. on the 5th means that Bobby and Lawford must have left Marilyn's house about 11:45 to drive from Marilyn's house to get Greenson and to get to where they were on Robertson Avenue. That's how long it would have taken to get there by 12:15 or 12:10. So that means they must have poisoned Marilyn sometime around 11:15. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But by that time, Marilyn was certainly already in a coma.
Right.
And that whole poisoning scenario that they present in this book is rife with errors. They try to explain it in the book, but they only make it worse. But that's the traffic stop involving Lynn Franklin. And once again, remember, there's no report. Why would a police officer pull over a car with a drunk man driving it? And in the back seat, there's the Attorney General of the United States.
Right.
Why would he allow them to continue on? Why didn't he ask Bobby to get behind the wheel? Why didn't he ask Ralph Greetson to get behind the wheel? It's all just silliness.
And when did Franklin come out and say this, Don? How long after?
Well, years.
Years, of course.
Years after, yeah. His first book, I forget when his first book was published. We're talking probably 25 or 30 years. Don't quote me on that because I could be misremembering, but I think it was in the 90s.
Okay.
I think he's just recently died. He lived a long time when Franklin did.
And he offers no evidence other than just, we're supposed to take him on his word. There's no police report, nothing to back this up.
No, there's no police report. There's nothing to back it up. Now, he claims in one of his books, he claims Bobby Kennedy was staying at the Beverly Hilton. I think he says that's where it is. He goes to the Beverly Hilton the next day, and the guy in charge of security there allows Franklin to look at the registry, okay, where he finds Bobby Kennedy's name.
Oh, wow. Checked in on his own name, huh? Genius of a criminal. That's a genius
you
criminal
picked
actor.
up on that right away. Yeah, he checks into the Beverly Hilton and signs his own name. Can I ask you a question before I go on with this? How can Bobby Kennedy go to the Beverly Hilton? Bobby Kennedy, Attorney General of the United States.
Nobody recognized him, Don.
Nobody recognized him. Nobody calls the press.
No.
And I have looked for an article I have a subscription to a newspaper service, and I have looked and looked and looked and tried to find some article telling me that Bobby Kennedy checked into the Beverly Hilton, but there is none.
What time did Franklin say he was pulled over? 11:15?
12:10 a.m. on the 5th.
Okay, 12:10.
Right.
And yet we know that, from the timestamp that Bobby Kennedy's in Gilroy at 10:30 p.m.
Well, we know from the letter written by John Bates Sr. that they ate dinner after the children had been fed. I wouldn't call it timestamp, but
okay.
I mean, he basically says that he basically gives the time. They sit down at 8:15, and they were through about 10:30.
Okay.
So if that's the case, and I believe them, for Bobby Kennedy to leave after 10:30, leave Gilroy after 10:30, and get to Southern California would have taken him about 3 hours, even if he flew the whole way.
He did it in an hour and 45 minutes.
Well, according to Donald Wolf, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Actually, Donald Wolf said he could do an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow. And does he offer how you would do that? Because you have to get, first of all, to the helicopter pad.
Well, what he says happened is a helicopter landed on the Bates property and didn't waken anybody, disturb any of the horses or dogs or anything like that.
It was stealth, Don.
Yes, it was whisper mode, yeah. Silent mode. He took a helicopter to a nearby military base.
Oh my God.
He doesn't really identify it, I don't think, not that I recall. Gets in a fixed-wing aircraft and flies into an airport, a government airport or a military airport near Los Angeles. And he does this in an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
Excuse me. The closest for Bobby Kennedy to do something like that would have been, basically, he would have been magic. It would have been magic, really.
Yeah.
See, they've got all these time problems that they have to deal with, and they come up with almost any explanation they can to deal with it. And the whole poisoning scenario is really problematic for them.
Right.
And they try to explain it. Marilyn, we know, had taken a massive dose of barbiturates. Okay, she had much of it in her blood
Right.
and 3 times as much in her liver as was in her blood. So, according to Dr. Nicholas Cozy, Marilyn possibly lived as 2 hours or longer after she took the barbiturates. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But during this nighttime visit, once again, Bobby and Marilyn got really upset, and she was flailing at him with her fist. And apparently, according to these 2 writers, Bobby knocked her down to the ground twice. Okay.
Yeah.
Marilyn wasn't drugged. She wasn't drunk. No, she wasn't drunk because her autopsy proved she wasn't drunk. But Bobby disappeared briefly. Lawford is when Lawford went and found him in Marilyn's kitchen, mixing up the poison drink. Okay.
Unbelievable.
He goes in and he gives it to Marilyn, and she drinks it, and she complains about the bitter taste. Although the book says saxitoxin is tasteless. They say that it's tasteless, but they say Marilyn complained about the bitter taste.
Oh, okay.
And then basically they say that Marilyn died within. She went from being comatose in a matter of moments. She was comatose to a matter of minutes. She was lifeless. Okay.
Right.
So how did all of those barbiturate drugs build up in Marilyn's body?
Mm-hmm.
Because if she had taken enough of those drugs to get to the level where we know it was by her autopsy, she would have been dead.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
These are indisputable scientific facts.
Right.
So how do they explain this? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You ready for this?
Oh, I'm ready, Don.
Okay, here's what they say. It is a possibility
Okay.
that Robert Kennedy gave her a high dose of chlorohydrate or Nembutal in a glass of water. Since she may have ingested the drugs or others earlier, the additional amount was enough to push her over the threshold into death.
Wow.
So Bobby Kennedy, Marilyn had capsules. So Bobby Kennedy must have broken the capsule. He must have found Marilyn's Nembutal and Marilyn's chlorohydrate and broken them down and put them in a glass of water, which he gave her. That really would have been bitter. Okay?
Yeah.
And since she had been taking them all day and there's no evidence that she did, that's what pushed her over the threshold into death. It wasn't this saxitoxin that would kill you almost immediately. It was this drink, this glass of water filled with chlorohydrate and Nembutal that killed her or pushed her threshold into death. They're trying to explain how it is that Marilyn could die almost immediately and still have all these drugs in her system.
Right.
I mean, they're trying to make her die simultaneously from the saxitoxin and the drugs, which is basically beyond the realm of possibility.
Right.
Okay, so that really doesn't satisfy them because it's got problems. But so here they give another way.
Right.
After Marilyn drank the glass of liquid given her by Robert Kennedy, they left her alone as they searched her home. Obviously, they're searching for Marilyn's diary.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Out of sight of the 2 men and clearly distressed, did she elect to ingest another liquid form of drug which pushed her toxicity levels into the death zone? Now, let that sink in for a minute.
So,
did she ingest a liquid form of drug?
Right.
What drug? It must have been Nembutal, right?
This is after the poison, though. That's instantaneous.
Right. So
Okay.
Marilyn is laying on the sofa, comatose and dead.
Right.
But she wakes up. She goes and finds this liquid form of drug, which she drinks, and then she goes back and sits back down on the sofa and dies again.
Wow. Unbelievable. I don't know how these people sleep at night, Don.
And here's what he says, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I can't answer that question. No one can.
Wow.
And I've never read in any book, or has anyone ever said, with all of Marilyn's drug problems, that she ever kept a liquid form of any drug in her possession. It was always tablets or capsules. Okay.
Right.
Now, I think it's pretty humorous that he will raise an issue or raise a possibility that kind of creates a question, but he admits he can't answer it.
Can't answer. Right. Unbelievable. And yet, Don, we're supposed to believe that Bobby Kennedy uses this stealth helicopter to get from Gilroy to Los Angeles, uses this complex poison, but yet he checks into the Hilton under his own name. I mean, it's just the whole thing is so bizarre, and
it's ridiculous.
I just don't know how these people say this stuff and they sleep at night. Like they must have zero conscience.
Well, they have one agenda, Sean, and that is to make money.
Yeah, exactly. That's how
you link Marilyn's name with the Kennedys and the book.
Money making machine, sure.
Yeah. But there are also a lot of I don't know if you want to go into this, but
let's do it.
There are also a lot of things they claim about Marilyn and her meetings with the Kennedys that could not have happened.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Because I know where Marilyn was, I know where the Kennedys were, and they were nowhere they weren't even in the same city.
Unbelievable.
For example, they claimed that Marilyn spent Marilyn was with John Kennedy during the DNC.
Right.
The 1960 DNC.
Right.
That also appeared in Hyman's book. Okay.
Right.
But Marilyn wasn't in Los Angeles during the DNC. She was in Manhattan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On the 25th of June, she was in L.A., but then she departed L.A. and flew to New York City. She arrived there on the 26th. On July the 8th, which is 2 days before the convention opened, she performed some costume tests in New York City. On the 10th, the DNC opened and Marilyn was still in New York City. On July the 11th, Miller notified MCA that Marilyn was ill and would miss work. She's still in New York City. On July the 14th, she notified Dr. Greenson with a telegram that she would be back in L.A. on the evening of July the 17th. Okay. The convention was already over, right? So there's no way she was in Los Angeles and also in New York. Okay.
Right.
Marilyn may be a terrific person, but she can't be in two places at once.
No.
And neither can Bobby Kennedy. Right.
No.
But they go through a long rigmarole. These writers go through a long rigmarole of what took place. The dinner at Puccini's on the second night of the convention.
That's in Beverly Hills, right?
That's in Beverly Hills. That's the Frank Sinatra-owned restaurant.
But nobody sees them, though. The President of the United States and the most famous woman in the world, nobody sees them having dinner.
There are no newspaper accounts of that anywhere that I've been able to find. Well, it couldn't have happened because Marilyn was in Manhattan.
Right.
It couldn't have happened. Ralph Roberts gave Marilyn a massage during that week, and when he entered the apartment, okay, Marilyn was watching the convention on television. Okay.
Right.
Here's what he wrote about in his memoir. Marilyn was alone in the living room when I arrived. He then quoted Marilyn as saying, "Author is asleep. They're showing the Democratic National Convention on television. Would it be all right if we have it on during the massage?" Then she says, according to Ralph, this is really important, I think.
Okay.
As they watched the convention, it became clearer and clearer that John Kennedy was going to win the nomination, okay?
Right.
And here's what he said. Marilyn became more and more tense. And then she commented, "I worship Mr. Stevenson," she said. "I know practically nothing of Mr. Kennedy."
Wow.
That's what she said.
Wow.
And I certainly believe Ralph Roberts.
Right.
They were like brother and sister.
Right.
But if Marilyn knew practically nothing about Kennedy in mid-1960,
how did they have this long affair?
How could they have that long affair that began in 1954? Wow. Certainly she would have known something about him.
Anything, yeah.
Not only that, they say in this book that Marilyn wound up at the convention during one of her many absences from filming The Misfits. Okay?
Uh-huh.
The Misfits hadn't even started filming.
Wow.
That time. They didn't start filming The Misfits until late July. In fact, she flew to Reno to begin filming The Misfits on July the 20th. On July the 21st, and the convention was over 6 days ago, Houston filmed the first scene of The Misfits, which is the opening scene of her preparing to go to her divorce hearing. Okay. Marilyn took one break from filming. August the 26th, her doctors put her in the hospital for a rest. She was suffering from depression, lack of sleep. The constant work in the heat had taken its toll on her, and she was abusing prescription drugs. Yeah, and that's why she took that break, and that's the only break. But it was long after the Democrat convention was over. So all of that is basically made up once again by Heyman, but then these guys just borrowed it from Heyman, right? But this is supposed to be indicative of their research into this, right?
Well, if you're going to do
claim
some
Bobby
research,
Kennedy
go ahead.
Spent the weekend of July the 4th together. Okay.
Okay.
Well, that couldn't have happened because
No.
Bobby Kennedy was on the East Coast.
Right.
That was his daughter's birthday.
Party. Right.
Yeah, and but apparently he spent all of that week with Marilyn, sleeping with her and et cetera and so forth. But nobody ever noticed that he was missing.
Come on, Don. He's only the Attorney General.
Yeah, who cares about him, right?
Unbelievable. None of these people check dates, or I mean, if you're going to get these lies straight, at least get the dates, kind of right, or I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, there's another one where they claim that John Kennedy was in town and attended a dinner that night and spent the night with Marilyn. Okay, but that couldn't have happened because the thing that he attended was a luncheon that lasted from noon till about 3 o'clock. His appointment books mentioned this luncheon, and they mentioned who was there. Marilyn wasn't there. Angie Dickinson was there.
Oh.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then he left, went back to his hotel, and that night he flew back to Washington. So he couldn't have spent the night with Marilyn at Peter Lawford's house because he was in Air Force One flying back to Washington. But then that's okay because Otash said he heard a tape of Marilyn and John Kennedy making love at Peter Lawford's, because he had tapped Peter Lawford's house or bugged Peter Lawford's house and tapped his phone, et cetera, and so forth. It's just, once again, it just could not have happened. Okay.
No, and this is the problem with when you're making up these lies about public figures. I mean, it's pretty easy doing some fact checking, to find out where the president was, where the attorney general was, and I mean,
there's all kinds of news services now that you can join for practically nothing,
right?
And search newspaper articles and magazines, and here's who attended this luncheon. It lasted from noon to slightly over 3 hours. Mr. and Mrs. Billy Wilder were there, Mr. and Mrs. Cluster, David Powers, Pierre Salinger, Roger Edens, Milton Evans, Gloria Kahn, and Angie Dickinson. Marilyn was not mentioned.
Wow.
I suppose people could say, well, that doesn't mean she wasn't there. And I suppose I have to admit, in all honesty, that doesn't prove she wasn't there. But what we know is they didn't spend the night together. Okay?
Right.
The fact that Marilyn may have attended the luncheon means nothing.
Right.
Just like the fact that Angie Dickinson attended the luncheon means nothing.
No.
But anyway, it's the book is chock full of this kind of stuff.
Well,
and when you really start looking at it and really start digging into it,
right,
you realize how much of it is just garbage, as you say, garbage.
And it's unbelievable what these people did, and like I call them jackals. That's what I call them, because that's what they are. Disinformation, the jackals.
Yeah, it's. I know we keep every time I come on the program we say the same thing. We can't believe it because we could never do anything like this,
No,
like people do.
Nobody with a conscience could do that.
No, it's really, really bad.
But the problem is, Don, is that people, accept this stuff as facts and people believe it, and it's hard to convince some people that their mind is already made up and that door is already closed, and it's just like the Kennedys and the mob stuff and the Kennedys and Marilyn Monroe. It's just, some people just have that in their mind, and that's it. They're not opening that door. It's a closed discussion for them.
Yeah, it's belief perseverance, and you're talking about a guy like Mark Shaw,
right,
who suffers from belief perseverance severely. He only wants evidence or only wants things that prove his beliefs. In other words, He will not accept any type of evidence that contradicts what he believes, right?
Right.
I don't think that's the issue here. I think the issue here with this book, it was written for one reason and one reason only, and that was to make money.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's what they say about Rothmiller's behavior as an OCID detective. I want to read you this. It says,
okay.
Let's see. According to Rotson, I changed their names to Rotson, but
right.
None of the information contained in the secret files would ever have been intentionally shared with any person outside the OCID. And if any of the documents with sensitive material, normally of a political nature, found their way into the media or to anyone outside the unit or into a legal proceeding, a member of the OCID would disavow the document and claim it was a forgery. Even if the OCID representative had to testify under oath, the representative would simply commit perjury.
Wow.
As an OCID detective, Rotson wrote, Mike Rothmiller understood this hide-the-document ritual and periodically was required to engage in this practice. Okay? So in my opinion, that's a euphemistic way of saying Rothmiller engaged in deceit, and dishonesty.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. How else can you see it?
It's the only way you could see it.
Yeah. So that being the case, how can you trust anything the guy says?
You can't. You can't.
You
But
can't.
Don, after reading that, I guess, if you give information on these secret files, if you can make money off it, it's okay to give a little information on it. we could break the code the old end, as long as we're making money.
There's a guy named Michael Griffith. I sometimes follow this thread on a post known as the Education Forum, and he started writing about this book. Okay, how great this book was, and how great Rothmiller was, and he totally believes everything Rothmiller says. And of course, Jim DiEugenio is a member of this group, and he responded to Griffith's comments disputing what Griffith said. Okay. Right. And my name got into it. Okay. I forget. I think maybe Jim brought my name up, or some other people who have read part of what I've written and read this article and stuff. Excuse me. My throat's getting sore. But Mr. Griffith doesn't think I should be believed. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Because I'm a love-sick Marilyn Monroe fan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He dismisses what I say or what I have discovered or the evidence I present, because I can't admit that Marilyn Monroe was promiscuous, which I've never said that. And I won't admit that she had an affair with both John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. Therefore, everything I write is bogus. Right?
Wow.
Now, this is the kind of people you're dealing with.
Right. It doesn't matter that you're presenting evidence of dates and times and facts. That don't matter. They're just
newspaper articles, pictures. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, that don't matter.
A fan of Marilyn Monroe's, just dismiss me and believe everything that Michael Rothmiller says. Okay?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's incredible,
yes,
Don.
Sir.
But I mean, I know we've taken up a lot of your time here, Don, today. This has been great. I mean, we really, I think we absolutely hammered this book out. I mean, this book is just, complete garbage. And I think we did a great job. But once again, you were great, and you're presenting the evidence. And is there anything that you want to leave us with and finish off? Anything we left out that we didn't talk about yet with this disaster of a book?
Well, no, I think I pretty well hit upon everything that I wanted to talk about. Did we hit upon everything you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered everything. I mean, it's amazing to me, though, Don, that this stuff just makes it into the mainstream, and just, you see this, where people on ABC or the entertainment network or whatever, and they just, they present this nonsense, and it's just nobody fact checks anything. Nobody looks at dates anymore. And a lot of this stuff, you could easily discredit this stuff, and people just don't want to do it because it makes money. It's a great story. And does anybody care about the truth anymore? I mean, that's to me, it's just really sad. This whole thing, what they've done to Marilyn Monroe's reputation, what they've done to Kennedy's reputation. I mean, it's just really a shame, and it disgusts me really, and I get aggravated. I laugh at a lot of this stuff because a lot of it you just have to laugh at it. It's so ridiculous, but deep down, it's just really, to me, it's just these people are just jackals. They're just disgusting.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care what they're doing.
No, they don't.
I've been doing this now for 11 years, and I've read a lot about Marilyn, and I'm a Marilyn fan. I'll be the first to admit it.
Right.
But I also know Marilyn was a human being, right? But these people don't seem to understand that she was a human being.
No, they don't care about that.
They don't care about that, right?
No.
She's presented as a nitwit who only cared about one thing, and that was, you know, her body, her sex, being sexy.
Right.
Which is not the way she was at all.
No.
But getting back again to Mr. Michael Griffith, I find it pretty insulting, and I hope he listens to this. I find it pretty insulting that he would dismiss my 11 years of work regarding Marilyn's life and her death simply because I'm a fan.
Right.
I think to be involved in her life and death like I have become, and to write as much as I have written about it to try to set the record straight, you have to be a fan.
You have to be a fan. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And if anybody can prove to me, in black and white that everything I say is wrong, I'll take my website down and I will never talk about Marilyn Monroe ever again.
But they can't, Don.
But they can't. That's right. They can't.
And it's irresponsible of them to say, you know, that. And the thing is, you got the truth on your side. So they really have no comeback except to say.
Well, I wanted to end it with that. I've been thinking about writing a response to Mr. Griffith and posting it on my website, but I don't think I want to vent my spleen in that way. I think I sort of got it off my chest.
Yeah, I think you did good. And maybe we could get this out to Mr. Griffin. We'll find out.
You can cut that out if you want to. Okay.
No, we won't cut that out, Don. We'll leave that in. As long as you're okay with it, we'll leave it in. I mean, I think it's great. I mean, you got to defend yourself, Don. You got to defend yourself. When somebody says something irresponsible like that makes zero sense. It doesn't matter if you're a fan.
It does not matter at all.
If you present
evidence, if anything I read about Marilyn that proves something that's a negative, I still write it.
Sure.
I write that Marilyn attempted suicide 4 times.
Right.
I write, that Marilyn was neurotic.
Right.
Marilyn had lots of problems, but that doesn't prevent me from being a fan of hers. She's an exceptional human being.
Exactly.
Anyway,
I agree.
Thanks again, Sean, for having me on.
Oh, Don,
I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it too, and we enjoy every time you're on, and you're one of our most popular guests, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love this episode. And it was fantastic. And again, we'll have you on again, Don, because unfortunately this discrediting and this disinformation never stops. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that we haven't covered yet that we have to get to discredit. And
well, I'm going to revisit my section on David Hyman.
Okay.
Because Donna Morell has sent me a lot of information about him, and there's much that I have never said about David.
Well, we should probably do a show. He deserves a whole episode, Don.
Well, if you would like to have me back on, say, sometime after the first of the year, maybe in the spring.
Okay.
Assuming I'm still above ground, and do a show on C. David Hyman or Clem Hyman, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because he really has corrupted the historical record. Really has.
Right. And he deserves a
even
show.
More than Slatzer, I think, because his books were written about the Kennedys, and many people have quoted from his books.
Right.
Unfortunate. Right. These guys.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
All right, well, let's do that, Don. We'll set you up, and I'll give you some open dates we have, because we're pretty booked already into February, so we can set some up. Well,
maybe
spring.
sometime in April or so. That would be good.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that, definitely. But thanks again, Don. This was fantastic, and just going to close this out. That's enough out of you, Heyman and Rothmiller and Thompson and all these other guys. That's enough out of you. Good night, everybody.
Don, I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Don. Have a good night.
All right. Same to you. Bye.
Thank you.
That's That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.